About a month ago, I was scrolling on Twitter when I saw that 20,000 people had signed a petition to free Andrew and Tristan Tate from unjust imprisonment. And in the week since, that number has grown to a whopping 189,000 people. Let's brush up on a couple of their reasons for signing. Point number one is that there is no evidence. Point number two is that the Romanian government is corrupt and the system is a lie. Point number three is that the Tates are strong male role models who are crucial to the fabric of our society, and men need to lead a revolution. And point number four is that the Tates are protectors and defenders of women, and they're fierce advocates of traditional values. Just so we're clear, most of these people are delusional. Their thirst for the Kool-Aid coming out of these guys' cocks cannot be quenched, and there really is no talking to them. You can't show them Andrew describing how he lures girls into his business by lying to them with the aid of a woman he's been grooming since she was 15.
I've had it where I've had girls who say, oh, I know you're with Vivian. I know you've been with her a long time. I don't mind. I'll stay out tonight. You two stay alone. All that shit. But it never lasts long. Because the ones who are really in love with you won't do that. You actually have to downplay your relationship with the girl of 6 years, which is difficult. And I only get away with that because the girl of 6 years plays along. So Vivian's been with me 6 years. She's completely head over heels in love with me. She wants kids with me, everything. When I bring on new girls, I usually pair them with Vivian. Because Vivian's younger. Melissa's like 28. Vivian's like 21. Vivian's younger, she's more fun, more outgoing.
You can't show them the video of him describing how he defrauds both the Romanian government and his employees.
Tell your girl that you're paying the tax. Because girls are lazy, and girls are stupid, and girls don't understand how taxes work. It allows you to pay her a smaller percentage. So really you're paying 30, you tell them you're paying 50, the difference is in the tax. That's where the disparity lies, taxes. If they don't believe you or they want to get fresh or whatever, print out some tax forms. I used to do this all the time. I used to print out some random tax forms and say, yeah, sign here and sign this. What is it? It's for the tax. You want to pay the tax or not? Okay. And they just sign away. They don't know what they're fucking signing. I'll throw them away afterwards. But they think something's happening. Something real's happening. Nothing's happening besides me getting rich, bitch.
Or his sadistic voice messages to one of his alleged victims.
Am I a bad person? Because the more you didn't like it, the more I enjoyed it. I fucking loved how much you hated it. Turned me on.
His backup plans for escaping law enforcement.
Same thing with passports, man. If I fuck up and England wants me in jail, I can fly on a Nigerian passport, or an American, or an English, or a Polish, or an Estonian. I have so many passports. What, are you gonna block them all? They can't stop me traveling. There's always a passport I can pull out. There's always a driver's license I can pull out. If you ban one, I've got another one.
The clip of Tristan bragging about taking a 17-year-old's virginity.
One of my main chicks has 200,000 Instagram followers, and I took her virginity when she was 17.
And many other things that totally go against the thrust of this petition, which is painting the Tates as just a couple simple Simons getting screwed by the system. So if you're still coming to this debate with this no evidence talking point, please, for your own sake, shut the fuck up. Otherwise, have a banana, some corn on the cob, suck on a popsicle, do whatever you need to do to get those dick-sucking muscles nice and toned for the legion of con artists you're going to spend the rest of your life blowing. All I can say to you at this point is I don't know how you do what you do. I wish I had your stamina. Thank you for your service, and God bless. But to return to this petition, I gotta give credit to whoever wrote this thing, because it actually seems like it could be signed by someone who cares about the rule of law. But as I hope I've shown, the reasons that the most vocal of Tate supporters give for signing don't even track with reality, let alone any concern for the rule of law. And Tate himself doesn't give a shit about the rule of law. The whole reason he moved to Romania was to exploit their legal system, which he perceived as being exceedingly lax in its enforcement of the rule of law.
So Romania is absolutely corrupt. But it's a corruption that everyone can participate in. I would much rather live in a country that's corrupt, where I get stopped for speeding and I give them a little bit of money, than a country that's corrupt like America, which says it isn't corrupt, and you have to be a billionaire and have a private jet and go to islands to get away with it, you know? Like, if you're going to be corrupt, which every nation on earth is, then let everyone play the game.
So while it is weird and a possible violation of his human rights that he hasn't been charged yet, I don't have a lot of sympathy for the guy. You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. In any case, I hope he gets charged sooner than later, and that the Romanian authorities deliver justice to all parties involved. If the Tates are guilty, lock them up. And if they're innocent, obviously let them out. But the focus of this video isn't this case. The focus of this video is to respond to this pervasive idea that prior to their arrest, all that the Tates stood for was male self-improvement, traditional values, and other socially important ideals that are increasingly stigmatized in our mainstream culture. A la the following clip.
If you want to know what I think Tate stands for, what I actually think he stands for, it's not, okay, he talks about the matrix and the system, and he has very loudly talked about how he makes his money and the cam girls, and he talks about, you know, whether he's toxic masculinity, what he's labeled as. What I actually think Tate stands for, is just male self-improvement. Getting in the gym, going to being a badass, making money, and if you make the money, you get the women, you get the Bugattis. But he's talking about becoming a better version of yourself. But nobody wants to talk about that. They want to talk about being a sex trafficker. They want to talk about him doing all the fucking ridiculous things out there. That, to me, is his message. But it gets masked by all this other nonsense.
Needless to say, I think most of that is horseshit, but I'm going to have a conversation with you if you disagree. So if you're the kind of guy who says, yeah, I think some of the shit that Tate says is a bit out there, but he's speaking facts on masculinity and feminism and a bunch of other stuff that you can't really say anymore in the West. If that accurately describes you, please hear me out with an open mind. And just to reassure you that I'm not your average Tate hater, allow me to make a couple more concessions right off the bat. I am in favor of young men having strong male role models. I think there's a very real problem of self-censorship that keeps most people from saying what they actually think on a range of controversial issues. I also hate being told what to think by dishonest and hypocritical feminists. Prior to him being locked up, I could appreciate Tate for his willingness to be challenged on his views. That's not a compliment that I can pay to many of his detractors. Also, from the little I saw of him on YouTube and TikTok, the guy seemed pretty funny, personable, and bold, which are all qualities that I can appreciate in my fellow alpha male. And finally, I love self-improvement. Cleaning my room, getting skills, working out, that's my whole bread and butter. With all that being said, I still think he ain't shit. I think he's a provocateur posing as a prophet who doesn't really believe his preachings on being a virtuous and morally disciplined man. In short, he is a hypocrite, and I will prove as much with reference to the interview he did with Piers shortly before his arrest in December. Lest I be accused of unfairly maligning his character, from this point forward, I will not say a single word on the allegations against him. So everything I just said that points to his culpability in this case, scratch that from the hard drive. Absolutely nothing I'm about to say hinges on his being innocent or guilty. For the purposes of this video, Andrew Tate is just a random, law-abiding jackass that we picked up off the street, and now we're listening to the sounds coming out of his mouth to see if this idea of him being a role model for young men holds any weight. In parallel, we're also going to be assessing how he aligns with our values, traditional values, like chivalry, bravery, honor, integrity, etc. Now, let's see what the man has to say. Early on in the interview, Tate spends a couple minutes basically calling the UK a shithole. He gives the UAE lots of high praise for their government, calling it genius and a utopia, and then goes on to mention the many problems of the UK, including old people rotting in old people's homes, wasteful spending, ineffectual politicians, and a general lack of law and order. I've never lived in the UK, so I don't know if what he's saying is true, but Piers seems to agree with many of the points that he raised, so for the time being, I'll just take their word for it. The UK sucks. I applaud Tate for his perspicacity in noticing that his country is going to shit and voicing his concerns on that pressing issue. But notice the shift in his tone when they start talking about the Taliban. Here's what Tate has to say about the UK.
It's falling apart. This is a failed society. London, which should be the greatest city on earth, is failing in absolutely every metric because our leadership is a joke. This country has failed on every metric. Nobody cares about the most important things in this nation. It's a failing country in real time, and that's why I've left.
And here's what he has to say about the Taliban.
The world is not black and white. The world is gray. It's very difficult to sit and make black and white assumptions about anything, to sit and say that the Taliban are completely and utterly evil and we're completely and utterly good, as you just discussed with the moral high ground. I believe that the Taliban bring law and order. It may not be the law and order we like, but it's a form of law and order, and humans usually gravitate
What about
towards...
their treatment of women? I mean, only tonight they have banned any women from going to university.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that whatever regime of law and order the Taliban has managed to cultivate in their great nation, it's probably still way shittier than the UK, by, to use Tate's words, absolutely every metric. Setting aside whatever disagreements we can have about Western imperialism, hypocrisy, and opportunism, without even really looking into it, I would bet my beta cuck ballsack that the average person would be much better off in the UK than in Afghanistan. Now, why would I say this? I saw a video of a guy falling to his death from a cargo plane when the Taliban took over a year and a half ago. And if you're surprised by that timeline, yeah, it'll be 2 years in August. Time flies when you're not in Afghanistan. Anyway, this guy was so fearful of the Taliban's vision of law and order that he perceived hanging from the landing gear of a C-17 as a preferable alternative to just staying put. And the cost of that decision was his life. People don't do that in a country that has law and order in the way that we conventionally use that phrase. And I fully take Tate's point about the world not being black and white. Human interaction is often complex, and sometimes it's genuinely difficult to say what the right call is. But preventing women from getting an education is a pretty open and shut case. It's not really a trolley problem. But let's hear his response.
Only tonight they have banned any women from going to university.
Fantastic. Let's get the feminists to go and teach them a lesson. The feminists are so tough. And they stand up and say they can do anything a man can do. Let's arm them up and send them to Afghanistan. I'm sure they'll fix it.
No, but it's not. It's a serious matter, isn't it? That women don't get the education they deserve.
And that's a very serious answer. If women are just as capable as men in terms of combat, like feminists pretend they are, then they can go over there and they can deal with the Taliban.
A lot of women do go to combat.
Oh, exactly. So they can go deal with the Taliban. It's nothing to do with me. They can stand up and fight for their own rights.
Surely you wouldn't defend the Taliban banning women from university.
It's saying it's nothing to do with me.
How alpha is that, bro? Just a voice of a generation right there. A true scholar and a gentleman. If any illiterate bitches are watching right now, please take some notes from Professor Tate. Write this down, okay? If your rights are being violated, you got one of two options. You can either call a feminist or get fucked, bitch, because to the ears of the top G, that shit sounds like a you problem. Us high-value males, we can't be out here validating any hoe seeking an education. But on some real shit, to the male self-improvement and traditional values crowd, is this the kind of thing you want your leader to be saying? Does he sound like someone who loves and protects women right now? And if you think I'm misrepresenting the guy, or just not letting him cook, look at all of these dodges.
Fantastic. Let's get the feminists to go and teach them a lesson.
No, but it's not. It's a serious matter, isn't it?
And that's a very serious answer. If women are just as capable as men in terms of the
A
Taliban.
lot of women do go to combat.
Oh, exactly. So they can go deal with the Taliban. It's nothing to do with me. They can stand up and fight for their own rights.
Surely you wouldn't defend the Taliban banning women from university.
It's saying it's nothing to do with me, Piers. It's absolutely nothing to do with me.
What about the Afghan women?
It's nothing to do with me on any level.
You don't have a view?
I have a view. My view is that people naturally gravitate towards law and order, and if you didn't have the Taliban, you'd have.
But I do think the banning of women from university in Afghanistan is utterly horrific.
And I think the feminists are going to arm themselves. They're going to show us.
Why can't you just say on that, you know what, it's completely wrong?
Because it's not my point. I don't understand.
It'll make your critics think that you don't think it's wrong.
They could ban all men. They could ban all short
But they're
people.
not. They're only banning women.
Correct.
In case you missed it, Piers just asked Tate in 8 different ways the following yes or no question. Do you think it's wrong that the Taliban have banned women from attending university? And each time, Tate responded with either a non sequitur about feminist soldiers, a banal point about law and order, or an exasperated admission that it has nothing to do with him. The guy couldn't be more of a weasel if he had a bushy tail pop out of his ass. If this is still unclear to you, let's dissect why each of his responses was shamefully inadequate.
I believe that the Taliban bring law and order. It may not be the law and order we like, but it's a form of law and order.
When a person is asked, do you like what the Taliban are doing? Responding with anything other than a yes or a no, followed by a brief explanation, is just not an answer to the question. To take it away from the fraught realm of condemning terrorist groups, let's say that I asked you, hey, random stranger on the internet, do you like rice? And then you respond by saying, well, rice contains carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are an essential part of any balanced diet. This is true, but it's not an answer to my question. I still don't know if you like rice. Also, any country that isn't in a state of pure anarchy and chaos, by definition, will have some degree of law and order. So bringing that up like it's a pro for the Taliban is meaningless. North Korea has law and order. When I wipe after a shit, my asshole has law and order. So fuck out of here with that bullshit. Additionally, notice how tendentious he's being with his language here.
My view is that people naturally gravitate towards law and order, and if you didn't have the Taliban, you'd have different warlords operating in lawlessness, and there would be no way to prevent your store or your market stall getting completely robbed by someone with an AK-47, and people are going to gravitate towards a form of law and order. America left, they left a power vacuum, and the power vacuum is now full.
So that was a pretty long-winded way of saying that the Taliban are a necessary evil. But as we will see in the coming responses, words like bad, wrong, and evil just can't seem to find the way to his throat when it comes to describing the Taliban. A group that, to name just one of their many atrocities, beat and shot a pregnant woman dead in front of her husband and children. Let's continue.
It'll make your critics think that you don't think it's wrong.
They could ban all men. They could ban all short
But they're
people.
not. They're only banning women.
Correct. They could ban all short people. They could ban all people with long hair.
And
none of it's anything to do with me. So they can do whatever they want. I'm not going to go to war with the Taliban.
Why is he changing the subject to short people and people with long hair? The topic is women's education, and the question being posed to him is, do you have an opinion on the Taliban's immiseration of women? But to his credit, after considerable back and forth, he's finally given us a semi-coherent answer by saying, none of it's anything to do with me, so they can do whatever they want. I'm not going to go to war with the Taliban. The incoherent part here is the idea that having an issue with the Taliban's treatment of women commits you to personally heading on over to Afghanistan to fight them. This is simply not the case. Take me as an example. I find the Taliban's treatment of women abhorrent. People, regardless of what genitalia they're born with, should be free to pursue their interests, seek opportunity, and become fully self-actualized members of society. And by denying women access to education, the Taliban are consigning them to a life of poverty and possibly slavery, where they have to be dependent on men to survive. This is terrible, it's wrong, nobody should have to live this way. Now, I can fully recognize how awful this policy is, while also acknowledging that there's very little I can do about it. I can't just roll up my sleeves, buy the next ticket to Kabul, and start throwing hands with the Taliban, for obvious reasons. I am just one guy. They are multiple guys, with AK-47s. But notice how there are multiple stages to solving this problem. As with any problem, the first step is to acknowledge that there is a problem, and Tate can't even cross that low bar, which brings me to the coherent part of what he said. He said, "None of it's anything to do with me, so they can do whatever they want." To shift gears for a sec, imagine you're a young child in a place like Afghanistan who gets raped, molested, and sold into sexual slavery. Incidentally, this is an ongoing issue in certain parts of Afghanistan that goes by the name of butchapbazi, or boy play, that the authorities haven't been able to put a lid on because the men who buy these boys are well-armed warlords. Now, what would you think of a person who, when asked for his opinion on this heinous crime, responds by saying, "They could rape short people. They could rape people with long hair. None of it's anything to do with me, so they can do whatever they want. I'm not going to go to war with those warlords." Does that sound like something a top G would say? Or does it sound like the musings of a poser who either lacks the courage or the intelligence to merely say the right thing? Fuck doing the right thing. That's a separate conversation entirely. Can he just say the right thing? Does he have the mental capacity to understand the right thing on a conceptual level? If you really think Tate is a protector of women, these are the kinds of questions that should be percolating in your head. But to close the loop on this point, just because you personally lack the ability to confront and defeat every evil on this earth doesn't mean that you shouldn't have an opinion on it. Even though they might seem superficially similar, it's one thing to say I can't do anything, and it's another to say I don't give a fuck.
But I do think the banning of women from university in Afghanistan is utterly horrific.
And I think the feminists are going to arm themselves. They're going to show us that they can do anything a man can do. They're going to go over there to combat, and they're going to teach Taliban a lesson.
Bro is on some morally insane, the enemy of my enemy is my friend type shit. Here's the 50 IQ algorithm running in his head right now. I hate feminists, and feminists hate the Taliban, so naturally, it follows by logical necessity that I am a fan of the Taliban. This is asinine, and once again, not an answer to the question implied by Piers' comment. Also, what the hell did feminists do to this guy that he can't stop bringing them up? Don't get me wrong, I find the bitches annoying too. No matter how hard I try, I can never get a text back from a feminist bitch. It's the weirdest thing. I don't know what the fuck is going on. It's like their social agenda precludes them from getting a cell signal. In any case, and I can't believe this needs to be said, but feminists, as annoying as the most vocal and blue-haired among them can be, are still much better than the Taliban. The difference is night and day. Black and white even, one might say.
Like I said, if feminists are very upset and they're very disgusted by the fact that in Afghanistan, women cannot go to school, I've been told repeatedly by feminists that they're just as capable as men in all realms, and I expect them to arm themselves and fly over to Afghanistan and fix it.
Like a lot of women have done in combat.
Good. Congratulations. Go fight. Well, this is the thing that's very interesting, because when you talk about ideas, it's not even just about Afghanistan and feminism. When you talk about ideas, they must all be defended at some point. There has to come down to violence. The world is backed by violence. Nobody wants to talk about this. It doesn't matter what it is. If you have a disagreement between two parties, eventually, if the disagreement continues, it ends up in violence. Feminism is defended by men. Men stand up and defend feminism, not feminists themselves, because they're incapable of violence. And we're in a situation now where you're saying that we should send men to go and fight for feminism. Why? It's not a man's problem.
Granted, there are many feminist dipshits who will go to any length to deny the differences between men and women. But how can our hero claim that the oppression of women is not men's problem? Whose problem is it then? If a girl's getting the shit kicked out of her on the street, does it really make sense to say that it's not the problem of any man who sees it happening? Call me a simp, but I don't think so. I think that shit is a problem for anyone with a pulse and a brain cell. And while getting the shit kicked out of you is a problem, being robbed of an education is worse. Not going to school, especially as a girl in Afghanistan, is like getting your only viable path towards a less miserable future kicked out of you. And for Tate to withhold judgment on that injustice and make excuses for it in the way that he has here is a disgrace. Now, to address the central point, I'm not even sure that it's true that men defend feminism in the way that he's describing. I'm no historian, but how many wars have men fought under the aegis of defending feminism? And hey, let's say that such a war is bound to happen. According to his own logic, feminists/women are incapable of violence. So when it comes time to gather the troops, who the fuck are those men going to be fighting? Other men. Does the violence that would ensue suddenly become a man's problem? I feel like it should, right? I think if you want to follow him down this gay rabbit hole of only being concerned about issues that affect men, then as a matter of principle, you should just become a pacifist. Because men get killed way more than women in war. So we got to cut that shit out. While we're at it, let's get rid of the NFL, MMA, and any other sport that would subject our high-value males to an insane amount of brain damage. And to top it off, I don't want anyone with a cock to also carry a driver's license. Because for nearly every year between 1975 and 2020, more than twice as many men died in traffic accidents than women. I hope you're beginning to see how stupid this is. We don't evaluate what's worthy of our moral concern based on the sexes of the people involved. We do it based on ideas about intentions, consequences, suffering, well-being, coercion, etc. So if you as a man want to get your head bashed in by Pate the Bade, I think you should be free to do that. If you want to do that as a woman, I think you a crazy bitch, but again, if you're doing it of your own accord and no one's got a gun to your head, be my guest. But if you're just out and about, minding your own business, and Patty walks over to you to deliver a swift UFC kick to your balls or pussy, we gotta knock that scouser out. In Patty's defense, I think he's far too much of a sweetheart to do something like that, but you get what I'm saying. Our assessment of what's worth caring about extends beyond what does or doesn't hang between our legs. We should care about the suffering of others for its own sake and live in such a way that everyone suffers less and less. To sum up, Tate is a hypocritical asshole who lacks basically every virtue you could hope to have as a high-value male. Bravery, courage, honesty, integrity, intelligence, I'm not seeing any of it here. It's all just bombast and bullshit. And as you can probably tell, I like bombast and bullshit, but I like it as entertainment, not as a foundation of a worldview that's being exported to tens of millions of boys and young men around the world. So as a counterpoint to Tate's fucking atrocious performance here, I want to share with you the story of Ismail Mashal. A week after Andrew Tate sucked off the Taliban in Piers Morgan's cushy London studio, Professor Ismail Mashal gave an interview to a news station in Afghanistan in which he shared his thoughts on the Taliban's ban on women attending university. Here's what he had to say.
اصلی را پاره میکنم
آقای مشهد حل
به عنوان استاد ما به عنوان استاد این امروز آوردیم به سطح ماستری و دکترا ماستری اینه کامرامینای دوستا بگیرن که استاد مشعل ما می اسناداره این اسنادای اصلی است ما سر از اینم امروز این می اسناداره دیگه هیچ به درد من نمیخوره این وطن جای برای تحصیل نیست اینه ما از پانتون میسور ما سند گرفتیم از هند استاد بودم درس دادم اینه امروز وقتی خوانم نخوانه مادرم نخوانه درس ما درس قبول ندارم ما دروازه پانتون ای استادم ما اینه پاره میکنم اصلی را پاره میکنم
آقای مشهد
Consider the difference in caliber between these two men. One was breaking layup after layup in a setting where he had no reason to fear the retaliation of the regime that he was being asked to criticize. And the other, unprompted and of his own volition, took a public and principled stand against that very same regime, knowing full well that they could arrest, torture, or kill him for it. And they did arrest him for it. On February 2nd, Mashal was distributing free books in the Debori area of Kabul before being slapped, kicked, punched, and pushed to the ground by Taliban security forces who arrested him for the crime of provocative actions against the Taliban government. No one in his family knows where he is or what they're doing to him. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have called for his release, and the Taliban have responded with radio silence. And in the meantime, a gang of brain-dead dickheads are campaigning for the release of Andrew Tate as though he were a similarly oppressed prisoner of conscience. What a time to be alive. And on that note, I will leave you to it. If you found this content valuable, please consider supporting me on Buy Me a Coffee. If you dig my vibe, you want to chat sometime, feel free to join my Discord. I'll be active on that every day from 7 to 8 p.m. AST. And that's it for today. Thanks for watching. See you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye.